Look, I am a Christopher Nolan fan. I have defended The Guy's Honor in the Dark, grease-stained trenches of Letterboxd for over a decade. If Nolan wants to shoot a 3-hour biographical drama about a guy staring at a chalkboard in IMAX 70mm, I am the first guy in line with my $50 ticket and my extra-large popcorn, ready to let my eardrums be shattered by a bass drop that physically vibrates my feelings. So when I heard he was taking on Homer's The Odyssey with a $250 million budget using only practical effects, I was ready to ascend to cinematic heaven. I wanted to see the Cyclops. I wanted to see the Wrath of Poseidon. What I did not expect was to sit in a theater and watch what is essentially a wildly expensive 3-hour historical reenactment of a very intense HOA dispute, filmed in the gloomiest, most overcast version of ancient Greece you have ever seen in your life, featuring a cast that, how do I put this, looks like it was assembled by a blindfolded toddler pulling headshots out of a bin at Creative Artist Agency. So let's start with the sheer visual audacity of this thing, because visually, it is a staggering achievement that will absolutely make you want to throw your home television into a wood chipper. Hoyt van Hoytema's cinematography is so it's starkly beautiful that it hurts. But here's my first question for Christopher Nolan. Has he ever actually been to the Mediterranean? Or does he believe that Greece is located roughly 20 miles north of Oslo? Because the aesthetic of this movie is bleached, gray, and perpetually drizzling. It's like the Odyssey as directed by a depressed Swedish existentialist. And we are talking about the Agency, a place legendary for its sparkling, sun-drenched turquoise waters. And Nolan has color-graded it to look like the parking lot of an abandoned Costco in New Jersey on a wet Tuesday in November. So everyone is wearing wrong-era armor that looks vaguely like Viking gear, sailing around on boats that are historically inaccurate enough to give a classicist a minor stroke, and shivering in the damp, muddy fog. Yeah, it is tactile, it is physical, and it is entirely devoid of the vibrant, mythic warmth of the actual poem. It's gritty realism applied to a story about a guy who gets held hostage by a giant one-eyed shepherd. And speaking of the story, Nolan has done his signature thing where he looks at a straightforward, chronological narrative and says, but what if we put it in a blender and let the audience try to piece it together like a jigsaw puzzle? So the structure is modeled after Penelope weaving and unweaving her shroud, which is a very high concept, intellectual way of saying the movie jumps back and forth through time so much that you generally lose track of whether Odysseus is currently crying on a beach, fighting a monster, or just having a really long flashback about his dead friends. Oh, okay, the set pieces are incredible. The Trojan horse sequence is a masterclass in practical tension. The Cyclops is staged like a genuine horror movie, and Samantha Morton's Circe is a volatile, bone-chilling triumph of sensual dread. But the narrative momentum is constantly shooting itself in the foot, because you'll be right in the middle of a high-stakes, terrifying sequence with the sirens, for example, and then suddenly the movie slams on the brakes for a 45 minutes interlude with a calypso that feels less like a mythological captivity and more like a very long, very pretentious Calvin Klein commercial where everyone is whispering about their feelings while standing in a tide pool. It is a lavishly occupied 3 hours, sure, but it is a grueling, uneven, exhausting slog that leaves you feeling less like you have been on a heroic journey, and more like you have just completed a 3-day layover at O'Hare International Airport. And believe me, I have been there. But we have to talk about the sound, because this is a Christopher Nolan film, which means the sound mixing is actively hostile to the human ear. Ludwig Göransson's score is a pounding, turbulent, electro-orchestral throb that is absolutely magnificent, provided you don't actually want to hear what any of the actors are saying. Because Nolan has once again, a la Tenet, employed his favorite mixing technique, which I like to call the jet engine over a whisper. There are critical, crucial, exposition-heavy scenes where characters are discussing the fundamental moral themes of the film, the weight of war crimes, the fragility of home, the psychological trauma of ancient combat, and their voices are completely buried under a roaring wave of percussion and the screech of synthetic strings. So you are forced to lean forward, squinting at the screen, trying to read Matt Damon's lips, while the theater speakers vibrate so violently they threaten to dislodge your retinas. So it is a sensory banquet, yes, but sometimes you just want to know why the guy on the screen is crying without having to guess if he said, "My fate is sealed," or "I hate cornmeal." Which brings us to the elephant in the room, the casting. Now, I don't know who was in charge of this process, but they deserve both a medal for sheer bravery and a lifetime ban from the film industry. So let's start with our heroic lead, Matt Damon. Matt Damon is playing Odysseus. So read that sentence again, and let's think about that for a second. Matt Damon, the most intrinsically Midwestern suburban dad actor in the history of American cinema, is playing the legendary cunning king of Ithaca. Now, to be completely fair and balanced, Damon actually turns in a phenomenal performance. He plays Odysseus not as a gleaming demigod, but as a bone-weary, guilt-ridden, severely traumatized World War II veteran just wants to go home to his farm. It's a deeply failed, introspective, career-best performance of, Matt Damon trying to go back home again, yet again, that anchors the emotional weight of the film. But the illusion is shattered the second he opens his mouth and speaks in his completely flat, unvarnished, "I'm from Boston" American accent. So he's standing on a beach in ancient Greece looking at a burning shipwreck, and he sounds like he's trying to explain to a contractor why his deck wasn't built to code. And then there is Tom Holland as his son, Telemachus. I love Tom Holland, but casting him in this role is a level of cinematic malpractice that borders on the hilarious, because Telemachus is supposed to be a young prince desperately trying to hold his household together against a gang of ruthless, bloodthirsty suitors. Instead, Holland plays him with the exact same frantic, wide-eyed, stuttering energy of Peter Parker trying to ask a girl to the homecoming dance. He's dressed in a tunic that looks 3 sizes too big, running around the palace like a toddler who got lost in the bedsheet section of the department store. He has absolutely zero gravitas, zero presence, and next to Robert Pattinson, who plays the villainous suitor Antinous with a level of unhinged, lip-curling gothic villainy that belongs in a completely different movie, Holland looks like he walked onto the wrong soundstage. The family dynamic, which is supposed to be the emotional core of this massive epic, has all the warmth of a cold bowl of oatmeal. You do not for 1 second believe that this anxious teenager is the biological offspring of Matt Damon's weary warrior, and their eventual reunion feels less like a mythic triumph and more like a very awkward meeting arranged by a social worker. But the casting absurdity doesn't stop there. Because we have Zendaya as Athena, who is incredibly charismatic, but is used so briefly, she basically feels like she's making a series of very stylish guest appearances in Odysseus' hallucinations. We have Lupita Nyong'o showing up as Helen of Troy for a combined screen time of what, like 90 seconds? We have Himesh Patel and John Leguizamo all speaking in completely different, clashing regional accents. So this is a colorblind, globally diverse ensemble that the studio has defended as a way to make the myth feel universal and modern, which would be fine if the movie didn't also insist on highly literal, hyper-realistic, historical detail everywhere else. So you can't spend $50 million building an anatomically perfect, realistically withered wooden horse, and then have the characters speaking to each other in casual 21st century American vernacular. At one point, a character literally complains about the suitors by saying, "I have listened to you potty, and I have expected someone to pull out an iPhone and call the ancient Greek equivalent of the police." By suppressing the actual Greek gods, because there are no Olympus debates here, and the supernatural elements are mostly rationalized as internal psychological breakdowns or dehydration-induced hallucinations, Nolan has stripped the story of its classical, poetic soul. He has replaced the ancient, terrifying wonder of the cosmos with a modern, clinical psychologizing. It is a movie about PTSD, moral relativism, and the trauma of reintegration. It is high-minded, it is serious, and it is frequently pretentious, treating the rich, bloody, expressive grief of Homer for a cold, clinical, intellectual exercise. It is a film that demands your respect, demands your attention, and demands you buy the biggest ticket possible, but it is almost impossible to actually love. But still, in an era of bloodless, green screen superhero sequels, a director spending $250 million to shoot a massive, flawed, deeply weird historical epic on real film is something we have to cherish, I guess. Oh, and Elliot Page will surely get an Oscar nomination to Best Supporting Actor, so there's that. But let me know what you think about this in the comments. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the Scene Surgeon. Much love and bliss.